All right, everybody, thanks for coming out here to Electrify Expo. Obviously, this is Industry Day. I am here with a very interesting panel of people, and a lot of guys here are smarter than me, so they don't have notes, but I have notes. So the first thing I want to kind of draw attention to is, we're talking about e-mobility, micro-mobility, last miles. Everybody thinks about e-bikes. There's also kick scooters and things like that. But one thing that we were talking about upstairs is the market is essentially 75% male and 25% female, and our panel is 75% female and 25% male. And he's way over in the corner.
I like these odds. I can deal with these odds.
This is the girl power meeting. So, Meghan, I want to start with you. You're with ScootRoute.
Yep.
So I think, it's very easy for people to conceptualize Bosch. We know what Bosch is. We know what ZuGo is. We know what Super 73 is. They make bikes. You're a little more complicated than that. Can you talk a little bit about who you are?
Complicated. So ScootRoute is a mobile, there we go, a mobile navigation engine for all things micromobility. So if you think about all the different, like a car is a car, they go 60, not a car is a car, but like they go 65 miles an hour, they can all ride on roads, right? Micromobility is a little different in that if you are on a moped that can go 35, 40 miles an hour, you're pretty safe on most of the majority of roads. If you're on a bike, you want to stick to the bike lanes. If you're on something that goes, you're an e-kick scooter, it can go 15 miles an hour. Maybe they even cut it off at 10 miles an hour if you're on a shared scooter. So we're trying to solve the problem of how the heck do I get from point A to point B on with the device that I'm riding and my preferences as a rider. So that's what ScootRoute is. It's a customized navigation engine for your micromobility.
That's nice. Now, Claudia, that was one of the questions I was going to ask you. There are a lot of different types of e-mobility, of micromobility, and the laws are different just about everywhere, especially in the U.S. from state to state. You have some bikes that are 20 miles an hour, some are 28 miles an hour. I was riding one the other day that was a little startup Kickstarter thing called a Scion, and I was clocked at 53 miles an hour, and that just seemed crazy. So, how are you guys, as a supplier and to Super 73 and ZuGo, how are you guys kind of navigating all those different laws, and what responsibility do you feel to your customers to help them navigate it?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So the question is, what is the definition of an electric bike? And in the US, it's actually the CPSC who defines what a bike is for the purpose of product safety.
What is the CPSC?
Yeah, it's the Consumer Safety Protection Commission. So they are defining what a bicycle is, an electric bicycle is but just for the product safety at the point of sale. And the definition is kind of broad and leaves a little bit room for interpretation. So the industry has done a fantastic job to introduce a 3-class model legislation. Class 1 means pedal assist only, so you have to operate your paddles to get engagement of the motor, and it supports you up to 20 miles per hour. And then we have the throttle assisted bikes, which are called Class 2. And then Class 3 is anything which is pedal assist up to 28 miles per hour. So this is an electric bike. And this makes it easy for the states to define what kind of publicly available spaces each class can be ridden. And that really removes a lot of confusion and uncertainty end users have. But anything beyond that, anything beyond the maximum speed, which has been defined by both the federal law and the state law, or the power capability, is not an electric bike anymore. It's a motor vehicle, and it should be treated as a motor vehicle. And riders on those vehicles should be aware that they are not riding an electric bicycle, and they should not use bicycle infrastructure which has been designed for bikes and bicycles. And unfortunately, in the past, we have seen a lot of more and more reports about injuries and incidents with safety risk where vehicles have been involved which are not electric bicycles. So what we are promoting is electric bicycles have a definition and should not, and anything beyond that should not be promoted as electric bike because they're not.
LeGrand, do you have a lot of questions from customers about this kind of topic?
Yeah, no, we definitely do. And I think, part of this problem is that, again, there's not, all 50 states haven't adopted, the same law, and even states like New York, for example, their Class 3 allows a throttle up to 25 miles an hour, right? Which is very different than in other states. So, this is part of the issue, is that it's not as homogeneous as we'd like to think. This 3-class system, it's imperfect, as many things are. But I also think it's a case where, the legislation always follows the technology, right? It always does. I mean,
it's supposed to, yeah.
Yeah, it's supposed to, right? So, but yeah, our customers certainly, there's a lot of confusion, and I think part of the confusion is that, it isn't well defined, because even on the state level, you get down to the city, county, even park system, and they can just outright ban not only classes of bicycles, entire e-bikes, and there's just this mismatch patchwork, and so there's really not a great solution, at least that I know of today, for the end user to have clarity of, hey, is the vehicle I'm riding okay to ride here, down this, bike path or, trail?
But that's what Megan's working on.
That's ScootRoute's goal.
I'm like, yeah.
We'll chat after.
Gotta talk after.
He's doing a great job promoting ScootRoute.
Love it.
So, and Jules, I know you had something to say as well. Did we cover it, or do you still want to?
No, y'all pretty much covered it. It's more based on the consumer. They have to understand their laws and regulations. If they're purchasing an e-bike from one of us, they need to know their laws. If we ship all as a Class 2 e-bike, like you were saying, that goes 20 miles an hour, they have the choice to unlock it, which keeps the throttle to 20, still Class 3 e-bike, pedaling up to 28 miles an hour, or unlocking it to a Class 4, which makes the throttle go above 28 miles an hour. So yes, it's just, once people go over 28 miles an hour on that throttle, then that's when there's more laws and regulations that are going to be happening, because people are abusing the Class 4 it's not really an e-bike anymore. You have a motorcycle or a moped.
So now that's an interesting question. So it's one bike that has different modes that can do multiple things, right? So and you have a couple bikes that are in the same boat, right?
Yeah, and I know this is a bit controversial, but BMW just came out just recently, actually, in Europe, with a couple of concept bikes that can be e-bikes in the e-bicycle sense, and also be kind of mopeds, and also be kind of like light motorcycles, all in the same vehicle package. And through software, frankly, technology, we can limit that. And so, they came out and said, hey, this mismatch of laws here, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The technology is well beyond, what the legislation has provided. And I think this is the case here, where, look, very well intentioned, I think, having, these different classes and everything, but it is confusing, and ultimately, this can be actually solved pretty easily with technology, and one single vehicle can do all of these multiple things. And so I think that, that's really the direction I think that it should be going. Do I really want to have 3 different bikes that do, one to go to the national parks where I can only go Class 1, and then I guess I'll have to leave my throttle-powered bike, over there? I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
Now, so this is an interesting point, and this is not one of our planned questions. So if you guys are like, he's going off script, that's what's happening. Do you see a scenario where you might have a rental fleet of like all one vehicle, and as the person goes to rent it, they have different licensing? Like if I have an M motorcycle license, I can use it as a Class 4. If I don't have any kind of special license, I use it as a Class 1. Is that something that makes sense, or is that just adding more confusion?
I think that adds more confusion in a lot of sense. It just makes things complicated. Obviously, our companies do dealers, fleet deals and whatnot, and they can do it under their own discretion. But once they buy a fleet or whatnot, they need to just abide by their state laws.
They own it. They're there.
Yes.
So I'm going to go on to the next question. This was a Claudia question, but I actually like it quite a bit. We all have a passion for sustainability, or at the very least, we can see it as a good marketing exercise, right? But ultimately, less congestion, fewer emissions, more mobility, better health. People who are cycling are healthier, they require less medical care, they feel better, everybody's happier. So I think it's something that we are all seeing as a positive, right? And I know that some of your companies are doing things like you're doing the donate a tree for whenever someone buys a bike, and then you have the plant a tree charities and things like that. What are you guys doing from a company side to make things that you're doing more sustainable? Like to make your manufacturing more sustainable, to make Bosch with their battery programs, to make that more sustainable. How are you kind of approaching that?
Yeah, I can take that. So talking about Bosch, we have been the first company worldwide, corporate company, who became carbon neutral already in the first quarter of 2020.
Oh, wow. Congrats.
Yes, that's impressive. It includes 400 locations worldwide, and it includes
Thanks, guys.
manufacturing, product development, and administration. So since 2020, we are 100% carbon neutral. And our sustainability efforts, they do not end at the factory gate, but we also involve our supply chain. So we have worldwide 23,000 suppliers, and we are working with them. We are awarding contracts based on CO2 emissions and CO2 ratings. So that's becoming more important to receive an award with Bosch. We pay attention to the complete supply chain. We pay attention to the use of raw materials. We work very closely and transparent with our suppliers of critical raw materials, for example, cell suppliers when it comes to cobalt up to the mine. So those are all areas, including packaging, for example. So our packaging materials are built of eco-friendly material, and they are also optimized when it comes to space for transportation, for storage. So these are all efforts we pay attention to. Also in the early stage of product development, our products are designed for the environment. So we are using a technology called LCA, which is life cycle analysis, which analyzes the impact of our product and processes on the environment. And we are taking all those findings into the product development to design an eco-friendly product throughout the complete product life cycle.
Right, and that's complete product life cycle, not only in the sourcing and manufacturing and sale, but also in the recycling and the lifetime afterwards, right?
Exactly. That includes, talking about e-bikes, battery recycling. So Bosch has been involved in the development of a battery recycling or collection and recycling program together with People for Bikes and Call to Recycle. So next year we will introduce a program for end consumers. They can ensure that their battery, end of life or damaged, will be recycled in a compliant manner.
That's great. And then, the other question that you and I talked about was, what can we do to improve kind of the uptake and get more people to try these e-mobility bikes? And obviously, the Electrify Expo is speaking to that. I think we get more people to ride these things, and they experience how easy it is and how much fun these things really are. But I think also, Meghan, what you're doing makes a lot of sense too, because that's a big question: is where do I ride it? We were having a conversation, Claudia and I, about where are you going to park your $3,000, $4,000 e-bike or $2,000 e-bike, but still a good investment. If you go to your gym, a lot of places don't have bike racks. Like if I take mine to the grocery store in my hometown in Chicago, there's no bike rack out there. So it's kind of nerve-wracking. So, obviously where we ride and also how we end up. Are you guys working with any kind of local organizations to try to expand that, or how are we approaching that as an industry?
I can start with that one. The kind of regulations is just one aspect of it. There's so much data and information when it comes to micromobility, where you can park. In Boston, that's where I live, they have moped parking spots where they are kind of like perpendicular to a normal, and it's only a quarter for an hour or something, where in Boston it would be $4 an hour to put, that's where you would park it. But that's only for if it's a moped. What if you're on your bike or your e-bike or your electric kick scooter? They'll get tickets by being on the sidewalk, but where else are you supposed to put it, right? So I think we're spending a lot of time working with the different cities to say, where do you want, everyone's starting to build the infrastructure, they're starting to build the bike lanes, they're starting to find the parking kind of corrals for these different type of mobility devices. Come up with your plan, we'll work with you on that plan, and then we'll kind of incorporate it into our app so that it's all in one place.
Yeah.
Well, parking is a huge problem, you're right, but the problem starts earlier. It starts riding the bike and riding in a safe environment, and therefore infrastructure is key. So the major reason why people do not ditch their cars and get on an e-bike or on a regular bicycle is they do not feel safe riding on our infrastructure today. And many cities really did a great job during the pandemic to reallocate space and give pedestrians and cyclists a safe environment. And now it's really, it needs to be a permanent solution. It shouldn't be a temporary solution. So really foster the adoption of e-bikes means removal of barriers, and cycle infrastructure and feeling safe is the top one barrier to ride a bicycle. Another barrier is the affordability. E-bikes are still a heavy investment, and the current discussed Build Back Act is a great opportunity to make e-bikes more affordable for a broader audience, because it's a tax credit at the moment up to 30%, which makes it easier, of course, to afford an e-bike.
Yeah, and that's actually an interesting point. So a lot of you may not realize there is now a EV tax credit for e-bikes and e-mobility products like that that is up to 30%. If I understand it correctly, it's up to 30% of the price of the bike, up to $1,500. So if you have essentially a $4,500 bike, you're getting like $1,500 off that bike. Am I understanding that? Right? I mean, you guys know about it probably better than I do.
That's the latest proposal, but it's
very dynamic.
Yeah, it's day by day. So we'll see what actually makes it out. But yeah, hopefully in the current form, that would be a huge lift, I think, to again just making it more accessible. And I just want to second the fact that the infrastructure problem, I think, is one of the fundamental problems, and certainly here in American cities, and that you really have to separate car traffic and bike traffic. I mean, you really do. You're talking about 60 to 90 pound machine versus a 4,000 to 5,000 pound machine. I mean, it's not equal even at the same speeds. And the other piece of it that ties back, and I just want to make one comment on the sustainability piece that a lot of people don't cover, and that is that when we think about the automotive sector, electric bikes, they use 1/50th of the raw materials that a car does, and 1/10 of the energy to go the same distance. So when you think about sustainability, and you think about, hey, how can we use, less raw materials and, less energy? I mean, the solution's right here. It's very, very clear, and and it's really positive to see the federal government now coming in and supporting it, but still supporting automobiles, orders of magnitude larger, which again doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me if you really are concerned about the sustainability piece. So,
well, one thing I want to speak to is, we talk a lot about innovation, and I know, you guys are really innovative in kind of the way that you guys develop your own tires and designs, and I know that you have, product specs that are different from other people, but. And again, speaking to that safety, but in terms of sustainability, I think it's worth noting also that the technology to make e-bikes really practical and really replace a lot of cars and on the road and kind of fit into a larger segment of people's lives, it's already here. It's not like we're waiting for the next big battery development to make these things work, or the next, charging station infrastructure upgrade. I mean, you can really use these things and change the way that you live and work today, which I think is another aspect of that doesn't get talked about too much. But how have you guys been innovating to, make the bikes safer, make them go further, things like that?
Yeah, so I mean, our perspective from the beginning was, let's make something that people desire, that they want, and
something cool,
right? And look, Tesla did this very well, obviously, with the original Roadster and the Model S. I mean, they built cool, fast, sexy vehicles, something that people wanted. And so I think it's the same kind of approach. And we're going, hey, how do we drive more adoption? It's make something that people want, that they desire, that they aspire to own. And so really that kind of drives, I think, our thinking in terms of when we develop vehicles, and as we expand what we have currently, that is how we're kind of thinking about things, is how do we make something desirable that, by the way, is also you can feel good about using as well. But I think that there's still a lot of opportunity. The vehicles that we're creating today weren't possible 10 years ago, right? And so I think as we look 10 years of the future, who knows, right? Who knows what?
Claudia knows. She's making all the motors and batteries.
yeah, she might know. But I think that we haven't even imagined maybe some of the new form factors and the new vehicles that could arise as you continue the miniaturization of everything, and then as battery technology continues to increase, all of the investment on the automotive sector. I mean, we're getting the trickle down effects here from that, and so I think it's real positive.
Yeah, one really important piece for the future where Bosch is heavily engaged is the so-called V2x technology. So the
V2X?
Yeah, vehicle to other road users. So where you have the opportunity to implement a communication between the car and the cyclist.
Oh, okay.
So you get warning signals and so on, and the optimum is that even the motor kind of reacts to and decreases the speed depending on the message you receive. So that's definitely a aspect of safety which has a bright future.
Yeah, so if I understand you correctly, like for example, now I have my own personal car. I have a Volvo XC90 that has the cycle safety, right? So if there's a cyclist, I get an alert. It tells me where the guy is, and beep beep beep, whatever. So you're saying that this would be a two-way communication where the cyclist would be communicating, and it's not necessarily visual, and then it's actually sending information back and forth and affecting the way the motors on both vehicles respond.
That's the final goal. So it's the first time that the bicycling industry and the car industry are working very close together because it needs both sides of the equation, and it also includes traffic lights. So it's actually a communication between three parties.
Yeah, I would need that because everyone in Chicago on a bike just blows right through the red lights, and it's infuriating. Anyway, so I just kind of want to go back. We talked a little bit about where you can ride these things. And LeGrand, when you and I were in Irvine, you talked about how when you rode out to that show, you took the trails in the morning and you kind of decide, am I going to ride on the street? Am I going to ride on the trails? And with these e-bikes and also with the ZuGo bike that has the fat tires and kind of that beefy frame, you can really make these choices to go on alternative routes. So this is like, are you kind of looking at it in terms of this is a commuting tool versus this is an adventure tool? How do you guys kind of balance that out, not only as you bring out new products, but as you plan out the route? I mean, how often are you including mountain bike trails in your commuting routes?
Right. Right now, we don't have mountain bike trails, but one of the things that we are going to be incorporating is kind of crowdsourced information. So if you are on a fat tire bike, maybe you can say, yeah, this was a great route for a fat tire, not a great route for a fat tire, right? So we can always incorporate that into the algorithm. Hey, there's a pothole on this street. Watch out if you're on this type of vehicle. There's one street in Boston that I've almost killed myself like 10 times. I can't remember where it is. So like if there's something that could kind of alert me, show me where the hazard is, but that could be all crowdsourced information based off of, who's riding what.
Every route is good for a fat tire, in my opinion. That's why we do fat tires. You kidding? I just think you can take an e-bike anywhere. The only problem is people don't want to take an e-bike everywhere because they're scared of drivers. And, for instance, in Europe, they have 10 times more bikes on the road, and they're more friendly to bikes. And until the U.S. can catch up and start changing the infrastructure, then the adoption of e-bikes and even regular bikes will pick up. It's time, and we're way behind. And Austin now is recently doing some construction down in Lamar, thank God, putting, I think it was like $100 million in a bike lanes, 2 bike lanes. But I think a lot of cities have to start, picking up the pace and putting the money to EVs. Yeah. It's time, and they're running late.
Well, where you are out in Southern California, I think a lot of this has already been solved for, right? You're making a face now. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, nothing's perfect. I mean, I think certainly we're kind of leading the way in a lot of ways in the infrastructure piece. There are a lot of trails. I mean, I can go from, our office is about, 10 miles from the coast. I can get all the way there without having to go through a single light, single road, anything. I mean, they're completely, on the trail. One of the issues, though, is just not enough of those. And so, these trails that have been used by, people, walking or, regular road cyclists, et cetera, all of a sudden now are getting flooded with e-bikes. And I think it's, pointing out the fact that there's just not enough. There should be a lot more. And especially now as there's a big transition, especially in Southern California, as you get closer to the coast, e-bikes are taking over. It's pretty wild. But in still a lot of cases, we're still sharing the roads with cars blasting, down. In fact, even where we're at, there's a road right there that, everybody goes about 70 miles an hour, right? It's a 50, I think, posted speed, 70. I don't want to ride on that road. I try to avoid that all I can. And again, there is a bike lane, but do you want to ride a foot away from vehicles going 70 miles an hour and half the people on their cell phones? It's terrifying.
Do you think that that speaks at all to the, I mean, obviously, so in terms of gender in the United States, we're about 50-50, I imagine, 49-49. So we talked a little bit about that 25-75% discrepancy. Do you think that that has something to do with it? Like, because I wouldn't think twice hopping on the road and going on a bike lane with 50-mile-an-hour SUVs and pickups going by me. And I think my wife is a lot smarter than I am. She probably wouldn't do that. Do you think that's got anything to...
I think that's the number one reason why it's 25-75.
Because women are smarter than men?
Well, that, and we're more risk averse. So I feel like we're always, like, it's just the nature. And also, and I don't want to, like, stereotype anyone, but there's, like, anything that's new, like, typically males will go out and try it out and give it a whirl because they're not as risk averse as females, right? So if there's more, if more females see more females out there, or they understand the safety features of it and realize how fun it can be if they're riding safely, I think you're going to see a lot more riders.
Yeah, well, Jules,
It depends on the female. I don't know.
I was going to say,
I jump on anything. Like, I'm just like, let's give this a try. If a car hits me, it's,
But we're in the industry. If you think about, like, the future, the masses of someone who has been riding or riding in a car for the past 30 years, 35 years, and then you're telling them, hey, get on this electric bike and go, ride with cars that are going 50 miles an hour, you're going to get some side eye.
Yeah, so one of the things I want to point out is, I also think it's about, I guess, redefining this for the younger generation, kind of, the people who are going to be coming up and being the adults and riding, these vehicles in the future. And that is where I see a lot of, positive movement there, in that, I think that whatever that mix is very different, I think, at younger ages, and I think that we can do a lot more, and I know that's something that we're certainly focused on, is, more of that youthful category. I think our demographics are probably flip-flop from a lot of other people in this industry, and we've had that real big focus on it, and I do think that, getting, people involved at a young age more comfortable on two wheels, more confident, regardless of your gender, or identity, then, I think it's going to really change things, but it's going to take time. And I think that's where we start, though, is much younger.
So let's talk about that for a second. So you guys have a younger demographic, a demographic that skews a little bit younger, and they're more comfortable buying things online, especially expensive things. Now, Bosch, as a supplier, you're supplying to, like, what I'll call traditional bicycle manufacturers that serve, that get served through local bike stores and things like that. And sometimes they're just as expensive, if not more expensive. Do you find that that's an older demographic buying the e-bikes through there, or a younger demographic? Or is that not your purview?
So it definitely started with the boomer generation, with older people, but that was also related to the design of the bikes. So design of the bikes 10 years ago looked horrible, looked really like not an
It was
aesthetic.
just a regular bicycle with a battery in it.
Right, the battery
yeah.
was attached somewhere. It was not an aesthetic design, but with the advanced technology of batteries, motors becoming more smaller, more compact, batteries are now designed into the frame. The bike has really become a sexy product and appeals now much more younger generation. So we have seen a tremendous decrease of average age, for sure.
Cool.
Yeah, I was going to say, one of the keys, I think, is also taking the friction out of the process. So I think it's, it's not just the product itself, but it's how you use it, how you buy it, how, it's serviced. I mean, it's all those things. And, the younger you go, the less, people want a hassle. Nobody wants to go out and have to get a motorcycle license, or by that standard, even a driver's license. I have a teenage daughter who refuses to drive and refuses to. There's nothing I can do to convince her to get her driver's license. And again, because she views, automobiles very differently, almost like public transport, which is like, oh, well, I'll just get an Uber. I mean, if I have to go somewhere.
Transportation as a service, I think, is the buzzword.
Yeah, no desire to actually own one. And again, it's a fundamental shift. And again, I think it's just going in the right direction.
Well, you talk about removing the friction, right? So I think there's a lot of assumptions if the first time, and this is something that's I think, larger issue for micromobility. The first time people start exploring an e-bike, they typically gravitate towards something that's less expensive, not necessarily put together great. Maybe they order it online, it shows up at their house, they put it together following the instructions as best they can, maybe. Then they have a bad experience and they get away from it, right? And they never come back to it. How do you guys ensure that, I have no idea what happens when I order a Super 73. Does it show up? Does somebody bring it to me in a van? Is it fully assembled? What about a ZuGo?
Yeah, so there's so many options to choose from nowadays. Like we were talking, like you could buy an e-bike on Wish or on Amazon, but you're not going to get.
Don't do that.
Yeah, definitely don't do that. You're not getting the customer experience, and not all bikes are created equal. Just because an e-bike looks like an e-bike, people don't see the quality and the mechanics that goes into the programming, the torque sensors, and how smooth the ride is. There's a lot of aspects to it. And when you're going with one of our companies, you're going with us for the support. We're all big on customer service and customer support. If you go on Amazon and whatnot, they're like, well, box back up. We'll talk to you maybe in a few months, or even if you do get support. But with our company in particular, we make sure we have 10% spare parts on the side, just to make sure if anything happens, if ever. But we focus so much on quality and durability, so we won't have those many issues. We don't have that issue of having to need to support people like that, because our bikes are made to last. And when you get an e-bike on Amazon, or like we were saying, like Wish, your bike is not going to last. It definitely will not, and you're not going to get the customer support with that e-bike as well.
Yeah, I guess we have the advantage of not being beholden to any kind of past in terms of what how a bike should look, how it should be packaged, et cetera. So we started with a clean sheet when we designed all of our bikes, and also in the packaging. Actually, like our bikes are packaged much more like a television. If you look at how are you going to take a 60, 70, 80 pound bike 3 feet off the ground, out of the box, and then taking, the zip ties off, and you got to install the tire, and if the brake disc doesn't line up correctly with the brake pads, there could be some issues there. And so, one of the things that we figured out pretty quickly is that although there's a lot of additional costs, certainly in the logistics, just much better customer experience in every way if we have as fully assembled bike as we can. So our bikes come 99% assembled. It is literally 4 bolts to just put the handlebar on. Everything's connected, everything's tested, everything's dialed, and like I said, it's more like a TV box. You actually remove the 2 pound or whatever few pound piece of cardboard off. The bike is there already.
We should have done this interactive.
Yeah,
we just bring the boxes up and take them out.
But that's the point. Is that when I say removing friction, I mean we think about that all the way through the process, and that includes when it shows up at your doorstep, and and with our bikes you can be out and riding in usually less than 10 minutes.
You're definitely not getting a bike from IKEA, build yourself when you're ordering from one of us. That's for sure. You're like, what do I do? So, yeah.
So we have more than 130 years of expertise in the automotive industry, and we are applying the same principles to our e-bike business, which means also the certification of dealers. So when you have an issue with your problem, with your e-bike, hopefully not, but then you can address one of the thousands of dealers we have certified throughout the nation. Also when it comes to spare parts availability, so we ensure availability of our components 7 years after end of production. So if you have an issue with your e-bike, you can rely on availability of spare parts.
And how has that been affected by the, I guess what they call the chip shortage, but in general is just a supply chain kind of issue that we've been experiencing the last 2 years? Have you found that that's been depleting your supplies, or have you guys been able to stay on top of that?
Well, for ZuGo Bike, we personally haven't, because we've been on top of it. I know there's a lot of e-bike companies that are having a difficult time getting stuff in through the ports because we import, go through Houston. We don't have that issue. So we have containers coming in every single, week, and we've seen 0 issues for us. It's just because of financial, the planning, the forecasting, and but there are a lot of people that have these issues. For instance, when I was just talking to you about this last night, how back in the day it was like $3,500 for a 45 HD container, and now it's $17,000 to $20,000 for one container. And these poor mom and pop shops, getting these other products that aren't an e-bike and have that high value, how are they going to stay in business? And that's the one thing that we've all seen is, thank God, we're blessed to have a product, that does cost us a lot, but also that we can afford to bring it in these containers with this high demand.
It's hard to get anything right now.
Hard to get anything right now.
I don't know how many of you have been doing any Christmas shopping yet, but
Well, this is going to be the last question, so make this answer good.
yeah. So, but I think the fundamental issue is there's a big squeeze in the whole industry right now. Everybody's growing like crazy. The supply is constrained. We're all battling for a finite amount of materials, and it's not even just amongst our industry. We've had to actually make changes to our product. For example, this chip shortage. We actually had to make a change to our MCUs. We had to mitigate these risks, and we're doing that in real time as we go. So it is a challenge. It continues to be a big challenge, and the end consumer, unfortunately, is paying that price. And I can tell you that at least from our end, we're doing everything we can. We have operational teams in Europe, North America, and actually our own teams in Asia as well. So we're already all over the globe, and those guys are working and 24/7. It is constant.
All right, well, we'll wrap it up here, and then a lot of people are here for Industry Press Day. You guys are here looking for some of the cars. Hopefully you're here checking out the micromobility. Check out these guys' bikes. I think you're going to really enjoy it, and thanks for having us.